At 30,000 feet in the air, the aircraft's windshield suddenly cracked open. The captain immediately activated emergency procedures while reporting the situation to the control tower. However, just as he finished speaking, the windshield completely shattered. The massive pressure differential instantly sucked the co-pilot out through the window while both engines simultaneously malfunctioned and lost power. The flight attendants continuously tried to calm the passengers. At this moment, half of the co-pilot's body was hanging outside the cabin, suspended between life and death. At 30,000 feet, the temperature plummeted and the cockpit lost pressurization. The captain wanted to pull the co-pilot back into the cabin, but the powerful airflow made it difficult for him to even move. Under oxygen-deprived conditions, the captain could only focus on stabilizing the aircraft and reducing altitude first. Meanwhile, the cabin was also experiencing violent turbulence. The flight attendants managed to keep passengers calm, while the purser and second officer struggled to reach the cockpit door. They frantically knocked on the door, but received no response. Suddenly, the cockpit door was blown open by the airflow. At this time, the control tower was also desperately calling Flight 8633, but received no response. If the plane continued to descend, it might crash into the snow-capped mountains. At this critical moment, after a series of maneuvers by the captain, the aircraft was successfully pulled up. The co-pilot also returned to his seat due to inertia. However, the tremendous force threw the second officer hard back into the cabin. He struggled desperately to crawl back into the cockpit. At this point, both pilots were severely oxygen-deprived and had turned purple from the cold. Meanwhile, ground control also activated emergency procedures, immediately grounding all flights and clearing both runways. At the same time, the tower continued making repeated calls to Flight 8633. The aircraft was still at 23,000 feet altitude. They needed to descend to 10,000 feet to have sufficient oxygen, but the Tibetan Plateau averages 15,000 feet above sea level. To reduce altitude, they had to fly out of this mountain range. What they didn't expect was that, with only 180 kilometers remaining to Chengdu, they encountered a rare cumulonimbus cloud formation. The cloud mass blocked their path, and the conditions within were extremely complex. Once the aircraft entered, it would be instantly torn apart by the storm. There was no chance to fly around it. Drawing on years of experience, the captain decisively turned around and began circling to look for an opportunity. Suddenly, a gap opened in the cloud formation. The captain stared at the opening in the clouds ahead, and decisively entered. This was their only chance. The aircraft swayed constantly in the powerful air currents, as passengers' luggage fell from the overhead compartments. At this moment, they were also being pelted by hail. Egg-sized hailstones came straight at them. The captain felt no pain. His eyes were fixed on what lay ahead, with only one thought in his mind: to land the aircraft safely.